wanted to list our top 5 Super Bowl contenders. Mm-hmm. So why don't you kick this off? We'll give you a dark horse as well.
It's like we're 11 weeks into this thing. I'm like, how many teams can realistically win the Super Bowl? Obviously, a ton of teams are still in it, mathematically, all those kinds of things. But like, how many of them really, realistically have a shot at this? Looking at this to create a top 5. So I was like, initially, I had a list of like 8 or 9. But then you're like, okay, a top 5. I think there's 4 obvious teams, and then the 5th one I think is tricky. So my 4 obvious ones, Kansas City, don't need to go much further than they're on for a three-peat and they've only lost 1 game. Buffalo, who just knocked off Kansas City. Detroit, who have just been curb stomping everybody. Philadelphia, who I think have rounded into, and they've got, pedigree, those kinds of things. They look really good right now. And then the 5th one is where I struggle. I think the 5th is still San Francisco. I know they've really dropped games and they put themselves in a hole. I still think that's the team where if they get their crap together, they're still a Super Bowl team.
They're the team I'm souring on. Like, they're the team I defended all year and say, they're still 2 plays away from being 7-3. Really could be 8-2. I forget who put it out there on Twitter. They've had 3 games, take this for what it's worth, where their win probability was above 90%. And lost.
Right.
Those are special ways to lose.
Yes.
Now, again, the old school way of saying this is they don't know how to win. They don't know how to finish games. Is there truth to that? Maybe. And then the other way of saying that is, they literally are a handful of plays away from being 8-2. Mm-hmm. Swing those plays the other way, and they're still the same team that they were last year, theoretically.
Yeah.
I get it. They're just, at some point, I want to see them make those plays.
They're definitely, they're obviously the one that I'm most nervous about relative to the other 4. But I do think that that's still the team where we've seen them in the Super Bowl, right? That's still the team that if they put it together can go on a run through the postseason and beat anybody.
All right, do you want to do your dark horse?
What's your top 5 list look like?
My top 5 is obviously similar. Chiefs. I put the Lions first. They've got the best odds now to win the Super Bowl. So Lions, Chiefs, and Bills are just like yours. Eagles, just like yours. And I think the Eagles, I keep talking about their ceiling. Again, if we're being honest, is there a big difference between the Eagles and Niners this year? Not really, other than those handful of plays. But I think the Eagles' ceiling is so high, their ability to win in so many different ways, including their defense now. And then my 5th team, instead of the 49ers, I'm going to say the Ravens.
Yeah.
Now, Steelers fans, who we're going to have great stuff for in a minute here with Charles Davis, Steelers fans are like, what? We just beat the Ravens. We only have 2 losses. But I still think the Ravens, again, ceiling-wise, with what their offense is capable of, some of their playmakers on defense, the defense has absolutely taken a hit this year versus last year. The Ravens' ceiling is higher, right? So the teams that I think can go on the run, and I've been referencing the ceiling of the Eagles and of the Ravens. I'm still buying into what they're capable of, even if it's not showing up every week in Baltimore's case. Baltimore can beat any of those top teams.
They can.
And they did it to Buffalo earlier this year. Like, let's not overrate the last thing that we saw. They dominated Buffalo like no other team did or has this year. The Ravens are capable of going on a run. I still think Kansas City's their biggest kryptonite, though.
Kansas City or the postseason, simply. Like, they have not. Lamar Jackson, Baltimore looks fantastic. Like, when they are at their best, they absolutely look like the best team in football, and they were at their best for a period, and then they ran into the Steelers, and the Steelers shut them down. So, number one, they might have to go through Pittsburgh at some point. That could be a problem. That Pittsburgh does seem to have their number. Kansas City, as you said, also oftentimes has their number. And then the third thing that seems to have their number is Lamar Jackson simply has not played at the MVP level Lamar Jackson in the postseason in his career. So when you're looking at this, you're like, okay, who can really win a Super Bowl? Which means not just being really good, but being good multiple times in the playoffs and going through a group of these other teams. I don't know that Baltimore can do that yet. We haven't seen evidence that they can, because every time they get to the playoffs, almost without fail, Lamar Jackson does not look like the same player.
Still putting them in my top 5. I just want to talk about the Lions really quick here. They're the favorites now. Betting markets, whichever betting markets are out there, they have the Lions, number 1. 9-1. Honestly, I think they threw the game away against the Bucs and easily could be 10-0. The Lions, the other thing that I think, if they end up going up against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl for whatever reason, remember they beat the Chiefs in week 1 of last year. I thought that was huge. And that was a game, that there's a Kadarius Toney drop and a pick six and this and that. But like the Lions, even if they have to go up against the Chiefs team in the Super Bowl, have all the pieces to make the run. We know they've got the run game. To me, it all comes down to Goff taking care of the ball. And even when Goff throws 4 interceptions and a Hail Mary interception on a Sunday Night Football game against the Texans, they still found a way to win.
Goff's funny because you would sort of look at this in abstract terms and be like, well, Mahomes, Josh Allen, some really, really top-tier quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson, in the group that we're talking about. You're like, Goff isn't that, but he can be. Like, in that offense, Goff is actually capable of having those, 90-plus PFF grade games where the EPA is through the roof and, his efficiency is sky high and he's setting records. Now, he's also capable of having games where he is just terrible, and that's a potential problem. But it's not like Goff is necessarily a disadvantage relative to those other quarterbacks. In fact, there's actually a reasonably healthy chance that Goff outplays any of those guys in a given game within specifically Ben Johnson's offense with Amon-ra, St.Brown, and Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery and that offensive line and all the weapons that they've got. Like, you don't feel great about Jared Goff, but he's absolutely capable of, a 4 or 5 game run where he grades through the roof, where his numbers are insane, where he barely puts a foot wrong, even against the best teams, even in the postseason. The Lions are legit. Like, they, as you said, they're favorites, and I think they probably deserve to be.
I mean, Goff is completing 73% of his passes, 112 passer rating, 20 touchdowns, 9 picks. Again, 5 of those in one game this year. And I still think he hasn't gone on his really good streak of play yet, Goff. That sounds weird with all the high completion percentages and the times that he's had over 80. He's had 5 games over 80, including the 100% game. But right. I think there's even more in there with Goff. Give me a dark horse. I'll give you a dark horse, and then we'll get to Charles Davis.
Yeah. So I didn't for my dark horse. I didn't want to go for a team that was could easily be in the top 5. I actually wanted to go proper dark horse. So I'm going with the Denver Broncos. They still have a challenge to even make the postseason, but given the way they played Kansas City, given the way they played Kansas City previously, given the way that defense plays, and the fact that Bo Nix is really starting to look good, I think Denver could just about achieve that.
Like Perna's got you just
red-pilled?
Oh, yeah. Big time. Big time. No, Denver's been very impressive. They've been the most impressive team this year to me, relative to my expectations at least. Second on the list is probably the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to call them my dark horse. And this, again, they just beat the Ravens, who are in my top 5, and they only have 2 losses.
Top of the division.
They're 4-0 with Russell Wilson. But they're a dark horse in betting markets, right? The betting markets still see them as team.
So, yeah.
Like, if you were doing power rankings based off betting markets, I see some of those floating around the interwebs. They're the 12th or 13th best team
because they don't trust
in the NFL.
Russell Wilson.
They don't. I mean, you don't trust anyone there. But to me, that's still a dark horse. I think they have they have the ingredients to go on a run.
Right.
I still don't see them beating Buffalo, Kansas City, playoff Baltimore. They could beat Baltimore.
Yeah.
But we'll say Pittsburgh is my dark horse.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.